Hello everyone, greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Foundation examination. So far we have covered the 4 topics in the very first chapter. We are still on chapter 1 and this tutorial will be talking about the 5th topic in the chapter 1 and that's being the last topic of this chapter. The next topic what we have to be discussed today in this tutorial is the psychology of testing. The psychology of testing basically involves certain parameters like why the testing team need to be aware of such concepts where the team is basically having certain characteristics to be attained when they deal with other team members and stakeholders within the project. So it does happen that when we talk about the development team and the testing team, there are certain characteristics where it involves the teams to be positively oriented towards each other. Where we talk about like the development team basically has the responsibility of positive constructive nature, where they are all about building up the things and creating applications. So they have a positive constructive nature towards all the entities what they deal with. But when it comes to testing is right opposite to that, where testing team is being considered as the team who deals with a destructive nature and always looking forward to break down the things that to prove that this system doesn't work, and also to make sure that there are some defects which they can prove and make sure that one or the other way it basically helps to build up the quality in the system. So being destructive, they have a positive approach, but when you talk about the development team, they have a constructive approach being positive. So in this session, this tutorial will be talking about what kind of psychological aspects must be attained by the test engineer, and the same must be continued further when they work with mixed teams of development and testing. So let's quickly move into the topic and see what we have got to be covered as a part of it. All right, so here before we get started with anything else, when we looking into the psychological aspects of testing team, let's understand what kind of independence we can have between the development and the testing team here. So when you talk about a certain topic within this is called as the degree of independence, which basically stands for how independent a testing team can be within the organization. So usually we see a different level of a differentiation between the teams across the organizations, which varies from different company to company. So we have put together some of differences between the independent testing team. So starting with the lowest degree of independence. So when we talk about this independence, it basically means that how independent a testing team can be from the one who has developed the code. So starting from the lowest, it says that test designed by a person who wrote the software and does test. So it simply means in simple terms that the developer who created the code is the only person who is testing the code. So putting it together is basically having the lowest degree of independence, where he does not rely on anyone, or is just the same person who is creating the code and also testing the code. So being lowest independent testing. So moving to the next, maybe another tester, another developer who will be testing the code within the same team. So it's not the same developer who created the code, but there's another developer who will be testing the code written by one of his colleagues. So it is slightly higher independent compared to the previous one, but not completely independent. Whereas the third option is what we practice today in the real world scenario, where we say that test designed by a person from testing within the same organization, or testing team within the same organizations. So basically, today we see that the scenario basically includes a development team altogether separate unit and a testing team altogether separate unit. So a development team is held responsible for creating the modules, writing the codes and all, whereas the testing team is held responsible for testing it and preparing the test cases for it and executing them. So this is the third degree of independence where we fall today. But we do see a lot of organizations who deal with only development, and commonly they outsource their testing. So the fourth degree of independence being the highest, where the testing team does not even lie as a part of your organization. They are completely outsourced or done by some other organization altogether. So we do experience such degree of independence as well, and we put it into the highest category. So starting from the lowest to the highest, we have all these experiences. Whereas lowest can be like when you talk about unit testing, the developer who has written the code is being tested by him itself, whereas the further testing can be done by the another developer, but where he is not the one who has written the code, but he is a developer within the same team. So what we need to understand at this point of time is, from these degree of independence, they want to make you understand how it can be benefiting to the people and how it can be benefiting the system, whereas how we can face certain challenges when we talk about highest. So looking from the lowest degree of independence, there are some benefits out of it, that the person knows what exactly he has written, and to some extent he can fix it. It will be easy for him to fix the issues because he knows what the defect is all about. So we can save a lot of time in defect tracking or explaining the concepts. So communication gap is also eliminated to a certain extent, where I don't have to have two different perspectives to explain that what I saw as a defect being a test engineer, and it is difficult for me to explain to the developer that what does it basically stand for. So what we see here is like it saves a lot of time when you talk about managing the defect and fixing the defect, because the person testing the code is itself a developer, so he knows what the defect is all about and he can fix it quickly. Whereas when you talk about the communication, we don't have a communication gap at all, because it's the same person or maybe the same profile within the same team, so communication gaps are quite eliminated. But when you talk about moving to the higher side, it basically creates a challenge when you talk about. So when you come towards the highest degree of independence, this basically helps you, like the benefits could be people are unbiased and they are completely independent from the one who has created. So we find more number of defects, and we are basically having a perception of looking into finding more defects compared to the one where we consider the psychology of development stating that we cannot find our own mistakes. So it's a common human tendency that it's difficult for a person to find the mistakes in his own work. Whereas when it comes to somebody else, like the teachers correcting your paper, it is easy for a teacher to find out your mistakes compared to you revising your own paper before you submit the paper. So same thing here, like when you talk about an independent, completely independent team, they look from a different perspective on the application, and they are quite unbiased to find more and different defects than the developers. Whereas the drawback could be like we have a lot of communication gap. It can be a misunderstanding issue where we pass on the information for between two different teams. The mode of communication could be like emails or some kind of test management tool, or writing the defect summary reports and all those things, which might not be able to be understood by the other team as well. So at certain point of time, we do have benefits for lower degree of independence, drawbacks for them, and we do have benefits for higher degree of independence, as well as the drawbacks involved with that. But considering the lowest degree of independence, we do not have much of the challenges, whereas when you talk about higher degree of independence, sometimes it becomes a challenge that what exactly is the issue and how do you put it across to them, because at some point of time it's the people who put it across in a manner where it might hurt the development team, stating that it might be your mistake what you have done in the work. So altogether we mainly we mean to say that anything which you're trying to report in a mixed team, we do not have to reflect it as a criticism of the person, which might be impacting to his on a personal window and may not help you to proceed with your project to some extent. And it also creates a lot of project risk, which we we'll look into that in chapter 5. So how do you deal with all these situations is what this topic is all about. So let's move quickly to the next option, where there's they say you few of the important points that how to deal with such situations when having a mixed team where you have a development and testing team within the organization, and what's the best way of conduct. So what we see here is basically what we need to take care of, as I was talking about, is here that usually when working with higher degree of independence, we face a lot of communication challenges, and it might build a conflict between the development and the testing team where people criticize individuals compared to the application. So we do have several ways to improve these communication and the relationship between the testers and others. So here are a few quick points that we need to consider and keep it in mind when working with mixed team of organization. So start with collaboration rather than battles, where you don't fight between you, and specifically, literally meaning that you don't start fighting, having rivalries between the team members, because it's all about the product what you're working for, the project which you're implementing. So the objective of every individual towards this would be to remind everyone of the common goal, that we are supposed to define the product's quality rather than fighting with each other or blaming each other for one of the other mistake. So mainly we try to make sure that we have a good relationship towards the team members from the different organization or different team as well, where it's all about that we are not trying to find out mistakes in you, rather we are trying to find out the mistakes or the quality issues in the application. So that's where we must be working towards reminding everyone and keeping them on track about defining the good quality system. So we have a common goal to be followed. Further, looking into that is communicate findings on the product in a neutral, fact-focused way without criticizing the person who created it. So basically, we mean to say that when you're writing reports, when you write defect reports, when you do get involved with reviews and measure the list of findings, you do make sure that these are the things which should be written in a quite neutral manner, where you do not have to highlight the person who has written it, like the author of the document or maybe the author of the code or the module. You must not be talking anywhere about him or her, stating that this is the person who has done the mistake or something about it. So it should not be targeting individual. Compared to that, you should be blaming the product, blaming the system, that this is what is not working, and we are supposed to work together to fix it up, to define quality in the system rather than blaming any individual. So that's what we are trying to convey here. Try to understand how the other person feels and why they react as they do. We need to also understand at some point of time that it's not that only your job is complicated. No matter, you don't know what being a tester, that what happens on the development end, being an independent team. So it's not mandatory that their job is easier. They would be sometime busy with making another module by the time you're busy testing one of the other module. So it's not mandatory that they are lying, relaxing and lying down to just wait for your defects to come up and then address you with a rejection or something. So it's not that way, where we need to also understand that it might be possible that their job might be more complicated than you, and that's the reason they have some mistakes happening throughout the process. So mistake can be done by anyone, and we do agree that humans are error prone. So it's more important to understand other shoes, that how they feel about it and why they react as they do, what you see when you talk about any such reflections put back to them. And also to avoid the communication gaps, misunderstandings between the independent organizations, you confirm that what the other person has understood what you wanted to say to them. So when you communicate any such findings, when you communicate any such reports or any such kind of messages to a different team, then you need to also make sure that the person is synced with your message. So syncing is very important, because what you wanted to convey, did the person really understood the same meaning behind it, or he has understood something else and then he starts working on it, and when it comes back, then you again reflect him back, stating that no, this is not what I was looking for. So the mistake starts there, where you don't even cross-check that what communication you made and the person has really understood and he's the same understanding level of yours. So we need to make sure when we do such communications between different teams, independent teams, that what we wanted to convey is understood on the other side, and vice versa, where it says that when they communicate something to you, you need to acknowledge that what exactly is the message all about and you have understood. So by following these activities, good conducts within the mixed team of organization, it will be basically helpful to minimize such communication gaps and misunderstanding among the team, and would really help you to enhance the quality of the system at the same time. So putting it all together, this is what we have as psychology of testing, where the psychology would definitely be a part of both the teams, where both the teams need to be sure that the system basically is a target for a goal, a primary goal of both the teams, not just one person responsibility. And we are not supposed to blame any individual because it's all a part of activity and the conduct of action. So we put everything on it. Finally, this is what from the 1.5 topic, that is psychology of testing, is. So this is where we complete the chapter 1. The very next tutorial will be looking into the sample questions of this chapter and understanding that what kind of questions can be asked to you during the examination, and also following that we'll be looking into the solutions with the justification that why the right answer and why the other answers are not correct, and there will be some tips and tricks involved. So stay tuned for the next video, which will be more important covered compared to the contents what we have discussed as of now, that is the sample questions. So hope that this video helped you a lot to understand the topic on psychology of testing. If you like the video, do subscribe to the channel, do share with your friends, and don't forget to like the video. Stay tuned for the new updates and upcoming chapters. Thanks for watching. Take care. Happy learning.